Having pretty much ignored Professor Jordan Peterson for the last couple of years, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation decided it was time to invite him on their Q&A panel program last Monday. Now, the Q&A program has 5 invited panelists that come on, and they answer questions from the audience. Now, as I understand it, the questions are pre-approved, so that there's nothing really random about the program. And normally the panelists are given a bit of latitude in how they answer the questions and how long they take. But in this particular program, everyone was told at the beginning that they would be given 1 minute each to answer the questions. Now, as the program progressed, Peterson was kept very strictly to his 1 minute, whereas the other panelist, in particular one of them, was given 2 or 3 minutes to answer questions, often getting completely lost in the weeds, not answering the questions at all. Now, the panelists were Professor Jordan Peterson, Van Banham, who is a feminist, Marxist Catholic. Believe it or not, you wouldn't think that would be possible, but yeah, there you are. There was a person called Terry Butler, who I think she was a feminist member of the ALP opposition. There was Catherine McGregor, the trans woman, and there was Alex Hawke, who was a member of the Liberal government. So we had Peterson and we had Alex Hawke, who you would consider to be, if not semi-conservative, but rationalists. And then you had the woman from the Labor Party, who was a declared feminist, the feminist, and you had the trans woman. Now, you would have thought that you could have had someone from the men's rights movement or an anti-feminist on the panel. But no, the ABC decided that you needed these 3 people and someone to look like they're helping Peterson to present, to present a show. Now, the show was started off with Milo, a question from Milo Yiannopoulos, who attacked Peterson for throwing him under the bus and saying he was a racist. Now, the ABC, once again, I think it's the first time I've ever heard Milo Yiannopoulos' name mentioned on the ABC. But the ABC then pretended like he was someone that everybody knew about, where they'd been, deplatforming him for years. Peterson answered the question really well. He just apologised to Milo, said he didn't believe he was a racist, and basically said that he'd been put under so much pressure by, angry protesters at one of his talks that, he had said the wrong thing. Now, the program went on, and there was a question about feminism, and Peterson answered it well, and obviously didn't answer it in a way that was controversial enough, so he was asked the question again. And this time he was a bit more assertive about, feminism and how feminists vilify men and how patriarchy theory is really just, a way of presenting men as everything that's evil in the world. Then they went over to the feminist, Van Badham, who, and this is the interesting thing, is that she got away with saying things that were completely untrue and no one questioned them. The ABC have fact checkers at RMIT. I doubt RMIT looked at these things. So what Van Badham said was, she said that feminists have never been violent. They've never thrown a bomb or shot a gun. Now, that's just a complete outright lie.
I don't buy any of that. I think the idea that the West is fundamentally an oppressive patriarchy is an appalling idea, and the notion that the proper way to view history is as a battleground between ethnic identities or identities in general, or between men and women, it borders on the pathological. And so maybe it exceeds just merely bordering on the pathological.
Let's go around the panel on that, because there's plenty of time and other questions to explore that. Van Badham.
Oh, I just find it really interesting. Like, I'm a 44-year-old, middle-aged woman who lives in country Victoria, and because I'm a feminist, I'm suddenly terrifying. I mean, that's kind of flattering. But the bigger issue is looking at disenfranchisement. People aren't disenfranchised. If you're being sold that it's feminism, a movement for equality that's never thrown a bomb, that's never picked up a gun, that's disenfranchising you, or globalism or socialism, we have not lived in socialist economies in the West in a very long time.
The suffragettes in the United Kingdom ran a bombing campaign, and they were training with weapons to assassinate the Prime Minister. By today's standards, they are in every way a terrorist organisation. So it's untrue to say that feminists have never been violent. They started off with violence. Then they only put their campaign of violence on hold so that they could partner with the UK government to shame men into fighting unwillingly in World War I. Now, these men didn't want to go fight a war, but they were accosted in the street and harassed by women who would give them white feathers and shame them into fighting what was a brutal war that killed 1 million men. And Emily Pankhurst, who was sentenced to 3 years prison for her bombing campaign, actually came out and said men owe it to women to fight this war. Now, here you are, you've got a movement who are arguing for women to have the right to vote, only wealthy women, that is, at a time when most men didn't have the vote because, poor men didn't have the vote. So they were arguing for this weird equality where rich women could vote alongside rich men, while at the same time demanding poor men fight and die to protect women, but not demanding the right to go to the trenches and fight alongside men. It's kind of insane. So to claim that women were, feminists were not violent is completely false. And to claim that feminists have only advocated for, the rights for everybody is clearly not true. And it's not, anyone who opens their eyes can see that it's not true. Now, the other thing I found interesting about this program was that a man who looked like he was about 70 towards the end of the program got up and said, look, we've got to a point in this country where we can't talk openly, because when we talk about things that the left don't like, we're shouted down, there are protesters, and we're just afraid to talk. Now, Peterson agreed, but the woman from the Labor Party then said, basically that's not true, you're just imagining this, and if by going around saying this, you're actually discouraging people from talking. So it's pretty much your fault that people are afraid to talk.
Do you accept any truth to the basis of the question from your point of view?
I mean, my job is I go and hear different points of views all the time. All I hear is debate. All I hear is people with different opinions. I just don't accept that you can't have an opinion in this country without being shouted down. I mean, it just seems so silly.
We've had a number of right-wing people come to this country, and then they've had their venues targeted. They've had to leave the country because of the radicals of the left that won't let them put a point of view that's different to the socialist left. And it's getting worse. I've got a lot of grey hair.
Sure.
This didn't happen in this country 15 years ago.
I have to say I've got a lot too, but it's pretty well dyed in my case. We have right here on national television tonight Professor Jordan Peterson, whom you might know is a figure of some controversy, and I say that with respect. I don't mean it in a pejorative way, but is a figure of some...
Sounds a little pejorative to me.
Is a figure of some...
Especially given the company that you put me in.
Well, I don't know which company he's talking about, but we're here having a very civilised conversation, I think, and there's people having very different views. I don't think it's true that people can't say things in this country, and I think that those who say that are going to have, I think, a very disproportionate impact on whether people are willing to speak out. If you keep telling people they can't say things, they can't ventilate ideas, which is what you're doing, then they're going to be scared to do it. So you need to take responsibility, personal responsibility, I would venture.
So which country do you live in again?
Okay, all right.
Now, that's what's called gaslighting, because clearly, there is absolute evidence that when people talk about things from a non-feminist, non-leftist, Marxist perspective, they are shut down. They're threatened with losing their jobs. People are afraid of losing their livelihood. They're threatened with violence. And all you have to do is look at the history of where people have toured Australia. When Milo toured Australia, they had to keep the venue secret until the night, and then Antifa turned up to protest, and the police ended up sending Milo the bill for the policing. Then when Lauren Southern toured, the exact same thing happened. I think she got like a $50,000 bill for policing which really should have been sent to Antifa because they were the ones that, created the debt. So really, for this woman from the Labor Party to argue that there's freedom of speech in Australia now, where does she live? Does she live in a bubble? Is she disingenuous? Is she laughing by saying these things? But, once again, people just swallow it, and they swallow it because if a woman says it, it's believed. So if a feminist woman says that feminists have never fired a gun or set off a bomb or thrown a bomb, everyone believes it, no one questions it. If they say feminists have fought for equality, everyone goes, oh, okay, yeah, sure, that's what happened. And if they say that there is true freedom of speech where people can talk about whatever they like, everyone believes that as well, when clearly the evidence shows that that's not the case. So here's an opportunity for the ABC fact-checkers to go and fact-check these things that were said about feminism, about the violence of feminism, and about where people talking openly have been shut down by protesters.
Federation Square became a political battleground between the far left and far right this afternoon as feminist protesters turned on supporters of a men's rights march. As Curry and Greenbank reports, police conducted almost 300 weapon searches to keep the crowd safe.
What started with nationalistic pride quickly downgraded into hatred and hostility